Hey there, this is Darren Peterson talking about jazz, and today we're going to be talking about tune analysis. A friend of mine has been talking about the various challenges that he faces when playing live, when faced with a tune he's never played before at a jam session. And that prompted me to think about how I analyze tunes and the ways in which I learned to do that when I was in school, and the ways that that's helped me in various contexts. So the in particular, my friend Hunter has been talking about the fact that horn players tend to see things in groups of chords. So I want to look at that a little bit and look at a tool that helps me to break down tunes and look at the shape of them. So I'm going to start with Autumn Leaves. I'm going to see if I can share my screen and record this. So here goes. All right. So I am looking at Autumn Leaves. Now, Autumn Leaves is a pretty familiar tune. It's also a tune that's, on the face of it, fairly straightforward. We've got, looking at the form of the tune, which is the first thing we should always look at. You know, it's marked here A and B, but it's really more like there's an A section which starts on C minor and goes till about here. And then it does the same thing again, same chords for the next two lines. And then it changes here. So this would be what I call the bridge. Da 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 da. The melody has changed, all that kind of stuff, and then it goes someplace else for the last. So I would really call this like A, and then another A, where the melody is almost the same and the chords are exactly the same. And then I'm going to call this B, and then I'm going to call this last section C. So this is kind of an AABC tune where the structure repeats at the top and it changes at the end. You'll see in a minute, this is actually kind of the same basic shape that other tunes take. But so having done that, this AABC form, the next thing to look at is where are the cadence points? And I think that our cadences are, in the key of B flat, this is 2, 5. I'm going to say there's a cadence there. That's 1. And then minor 2, 5 to G minor. 2, 5, 1 there. And then the same thing happens on the second A section. And then here's one of the key points in Autumn Leaves is it switches to 2, 5, 1 in G minor. So it changes the order of it. It does the same chords, but it does them backward. Then you've got the same thing in the C section, 2, 5, 1 in G minor, but it immediately begins a chain of 2 5s that leads to 4, given the fact that we're in the key of B flat. It's 2, 5, 2, 5 to 4. C is 5 of F, and B flat is 5 of E flat, and then 2, 5, 1 to G minor again. So those are our cadence points. So that's one of the things you want to notice. Then I want to show you like an analysis trick that I learned when I was at school, which is to say that anytime you see a chord which is preceded by its 5, this cadence point of B flat has a 5 next to it, I'm going to go ahead and draw an arrow that says this is 5 to 1. So we've got a 5 to 1 here, we've got a 5 to 1 here, we've got a 5 to 1 here. Ugly arrows, very dirty, but you can kind of see the point. 5 to 1, and then interestingly, this is 5 to 1 temporarily to F minor, and 5 to 1 to E flat, and then 5 to 1 to G, and this is 5 of 2, back up at the top. So those are all the dominant chords. Now, most of our dominant chords in this tune are preceded by a 2 chord. So the notation that they told us to use to analyze with that was to say, draw a bracket between the 2 and the 5. So anytime you see, I don't know if y'all can hear the thunder out there, but we're having a thunderstorm. Bracket 2 to 5, and then arrow 5 to 1. So you can see this whole tune is made up of 2 5s. all these are 2 5s, 2 5, 2 5, 2 5 1. And of course, you could always throw the D minor 7 in front of the G7 if you wanted to. Sorry. Yeah, no, you throw the D minor 7 flat 5 in front of the G7 leading back to C minor. So you could imply a 2 5 here if you wished. So what I can do with that is I can actually then forget about the chord names themselves, and I can think to myself, so what I can do with that is actually take away the specific chords, and I can think of these in terms of key relationships using numbers. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me the shape of the tune without having to worry about what key it's actually in. It makes it easy to transpose. It makes it easy to remember and think about, and gives you more of a sense of the structure of things so that you can compare one tune to another and see if the chord progressions on some tunes recur a lot. So I'm going to undo all my markings here, and I'm going to go to a new screen, and we're just going to talk about autumn leaves in the abstract. So with a fake whiteboard here, I've got the ability to create what is effectively a note card, sort of a reference. And I do this with a lot of tunes that I'm learning. I did in the past when I was in school, continually do it now once in a while when I'm thinking about new stuff. And that is a way for me to build out a reference card that doesn't require me to know the specific chord names. It only takes the key relationships and the 2 5s and that kind of stuff and puts them together. So I'm going to spend some time looking at that. So autumn leaves here, I'm going to say 2 minor, and then I'm going to grab my pencil and I'm going to say 2 minor, 2 1. So that's the first line. Actually, I should say that is not quite the first line. There's also a 4 chord in there, which I'm going to add, right? Autumn leaves also has that 4 chord. So autumn leaves also has that 4 chord in there. And then it goes 2 5 1 in G minor. As it turns out, that 2 is also the 7. Seven minor 7 flat 5. But it's still a 2 5. It's a minor 2 5 of 6. Okay, so I've got 2 implied 5 here because of the bracket resolving to 1, 4, and then 7, 3 dominant moving to 6, or 2 5 of 6. And of course, the same thing happens in the second A section. So I can just put a repeat there and there. I usually do this longhand on the note card, so this is ugly, but it's also a way to see the structure of the tune. For the bridge, we know it's the same as before, so I'm going to say 2 5 of 6 and 2 5 of 1. So the C section is unique in the tune in that it goes 2 5 of 6, which we're used to, but then 6 becomes a 2 in a chain of 2 5s, which goes 2 5 of 2 5 of 4. And you can play through that just by playing 2 5 2 5, and then it naturally resolves itself to the 4 chord because every chord is a fifth away from the previous chord, or a fourth. And then of course a 2 5 of 6 at the end. So I'll make myself a card which basically just says this, and it tells me, hey, it's 2 5 1 4 7 half diminished turns into 2 5 of 6, repeats that, 2 5 of 6, 2 5 of 1, and then 2 5 of 6 chain of 2 5s to 4, and then of course the 2-5 of 6 at the end that I didn't write in here. So I've actually got physical note cards that I have for these kinds of tunes that I do kind of all the time. I used to do all the time when I was learning these tunes. Anytime I want to memorize a new tune, this is a great way to analyze it. It takes it out of the realm of chord, 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 and begins to show you the structure and the patterns of the tunes. And because Autumn Leaves is relatively simple, with the exclusion of this last line, because it alternates between major and its relative minor pretty much throughout the entire tune, there's not a lot of tricks here. But if we look at another tune, we might find something else more complex and more interesting. So let's go look at that. I'm going to have us look at All the Things You Are. And All the Things You Are, and I've highlighted it with all of the different key centers. So every chord that's in blue here in these first 5 bars is all in the key of A flat. So this is 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, very much like we just saw on Autumn Leaves. But then it does a funny thing. And so I'm going to quickly add my brackets to say this is a 2-5. Of 1, and here's 4. And then we have a 5-to-1 relationship between G and C. What's interesting, though, is that although it's not pictured here, usually I put a D minor chord here, like a 2 chord. So I'm actually just going to bracket it and say we can play the 2 anytime we see the 5. So when I'm bracketing it and doing that, there's actually a key relationship thing that's interesting to note. So I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to say, the keys are in the car. With All the Things You Are, the first thing we want to do is look at where our cadence point is. Our cadence point, as is fairly typical, is at the end of a line. So this A flat is our 1 chord. This is 6, 2, 5, 1, and then 4. And then here we have a 5-to-1 relationship, which I'm just going to say that I almost always play the 2 chord on that. Just because the 2s can always be added before 5s. So what's interesting here then is we've got a key relationship which you can use when you're trying to play All the Things You Are, which says that D flat major 7 moves up a half step to D minor 7, G7, C major 7. So that's the way that I actually anchor myself and think about it. So then what we're looking at then is we have a cadence in the key of 1. We've got 4, and then we've got a 3 major is our 3 major is our cadence point in that second line. So what I'm doing is I'm going to put in my 2 5s. I'm going to make that just a little smaller. Got my 2 5, and then I've got a 2 5 here. Now, in order to make it clear to myself what this 2 is, I'm going to go ahead and write it in and say sharp 4 minor. I don't have to say the 5 because the 2 and the 5 are in a locked 5th apart relationship. So I know that whatever this chord happens to be, I know what its 5 will be, and I know that it'll resolve to 3 major. So notation-wise, I just say sharp 4 minor. And just for convenience, for the starting chord, I'll say 6 minor. So 6 minor, 2 5 1 to major, 4 sharp 4 minor to 3 major with a 2 5 1 relationship. And that's a way to sort of abstract the analysis of tunes. The same pattern on All the Things You Are is going to hold for the second A section that starts on C minor here. It's got a 2 5 1. It's got a 4 chord. It's got a 2 5 1 2 G major. Now, the relationship between B flat major and G major is the same. Sorry, E flat major. I obscured it with my writing. E flat major and G major is the same as the relationship between A flat major and C major, in that it's relative 3 major. So I think that what I'll do here is I'm just going to say key change key of. So since the patterns are the same, it's 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, and then sharp 4, 2, 5 to major 3. I'm going to just say key of 5. Key of 5, repeat pattern. So when we're looking at the bridge, it's 2-5 to G and then 2-5 to E. That's really 2-5 to G and then 2-5 to its relative minor, except it deceptively resolves to major, so E major instead of E minor. You can think of that in a unit together as major and relative minor with this deceptive resolution, which I think is the way that works best for me. But you can also think of it in terms of its relationship to the 1. So it is 7 and flat 6 majors, respectively. So our last A section is, I'll say last A section, 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, and then 4 minor, flat 3 minor, and flat 3 diminished, leading to 2, 5, 1. Leading to 2, 5, 1. And then 2, 5 back to the top, which is a 6 chord. So the only thing that really needs explaining right here then is this 4 minor chord. Like, where does it come from? It's not diatonic to A flat. This C minor 7 chord, the D flat minor 7 chord, I should say, is not diatonic to A flat. Where does it come from? And the theory explanation for this is that it comes from A flat minor and it's borrowed into the key. So D flat minor is diatonic to A flat minor. If you sat down and did the diatonic chords available to you in the key of A flat minor, you would find D flat minors available. And so lots of times composers will steal chords from the parallel minor keys, and that's what that comes from. So if there's questions on that, of course, happy to answer those, but that's the short version of saying we're passing from 4 to a borrowed chord from minor, 3 minor, flat 3 diminished to 2. So it's just a sort of a walk down using those colors that brings you back to 2. Sort of an alternate way to do that besides your normal 5 to 1 resolution. So having done this analysis, I could take this and put it in any key. I could put this in, let's say we're going to put it in C major, right? So C major is here. I know that 6 of C is A, 2, 5 would be D minor to G of 1, F would be 4, and then I know that it's a sharp 4 minor, 2, 5, 1. So I'm going to say, oh, so if that's F, that makes this F sharp minor. And I know F sharp is 2 of E, so it's 2, 5, 1. So it's F sharp minor 7, B 7, and then E major 7. So it's fairly straightforward to calculate once. I mean, if you know 5 of this and 2 of that well enough, great. And if you can't actually say that, you might be able to put your hands in the right place on the piano or the guitar and work out the 2, 5, 1s a little more easily than having to actually calculate every single chord off the lead sheet over here and mentally do the math on every single chord. You could just say it's 6 in the key of 1, 2, 5 in the key of 1, 4 in the key of 1, sharp 4, acting as 2, 5 of flat of a 3 major. And they do the same thing in the key of 5. The only trick I didn't say here is that this 3 major, if you've played all the things you know this already, 3 major becomes 3 minor. Oh, and then that becomes 6. Minor of 5, and that begins the pattern that we saw in the first A section again. So that's an important thing to note, is these relationships between one chord and its next, between 4 and sharp 4, between 3 major and 3 minor, those become useful to explain the tune to yourself. Maybe you have to transpose it or improvise on it or whatever. Because if I'm tooling around on a C major 7 chord here, and I know that I've got the same chord but minor coming up, the same root but minor coming up, I may choose to play a phrase and then play that same phrase but in the minor tonality. I might choose to play something here in C major and then put myself a 2-5 to C minor here, so that I'm tonicizing C minor and sort of forecasting what I'm about to play. So in this 8th bar of the tune, I could put a 5 of C minor there if I chose to. So there's different things that you can do with the knowledge that you gain by doing this kind of abstraction analysis, where you're looking at key centers and chord relationships using numbers instead of letters. So that's the way that I go about analyzing tunes. Hopefully that's interesting or useful. So looking at these as Roman numeral analyses can be really helpful. And they lay the groundwork to be able to look at a tune on the bandstand and be able to see the shape of it. So even just getting out your pencil before you play the tune and scribbling, brackets and arrows where all the 2/5s are may make it easier to sort of negotiate things. So hopefully that's useful. All right, I'm going to see if any of what I've just said is useful to edit down to a video and post it on YouTube. And if not, I'll have to do all this again. Ta-da.